Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning from the West Coast. Thank you for joining our webinar, Tips on Applying to Graduate School. My name is Alexandra and I'm a PhD student at UC Davis, and I'm also the Executive Director of Assyrian Studies Association, which is sponsoring this educational webinar. My co-host for today is Mary Isaac, who's also a PhD student at UC Irvine. The goal of today's webinar is to enhance the strength of applications of prospective graduate students, either in master's or PhD programs. And pursuing a graduate degree is really a huge decision. And so our aim for today is to provide structured guidance for students who are considering applying to graduate programs. And we will offer advice from our experiences on how to do research and craft successful application. Please note that we are not representing any of our universities, and this webinar is solely for educational purposes only, to provide support for individuals interested in knowing about the graduate school application process and how to make their applications stand out. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end, but please feel free to ask questions throughout the entire webinar. We'll go ahead and address them as we get them. So before we begin, I just wanted to do some brief introductions and give some background about our application cycle. And I think, Mary, if you want to go ahead and share the screen, or I can share it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. You can go on to the next slide. Perfect. So hi, I'm Alexandra. This is my photo. So really briefly, again, I'm the Executive Director of the Assyrian Studies Association, and I'm currently obtaining a PhD in political science at UC Davis, where I'm studying international relations, civil conflict, bilateral agreements, and minority politics. I've also studied political economy, comparative politics, and voting behavior at Cal State Los Angeles, where I earned my master's degree. Prior to Cal State LA, I earned my bachelor's degree in political science and communications at UC Davis. So a little background about my application cycle is that I applied in 2020 during the pandemic of all the times in the world to apply. And I submitted a roughly 14 to 15 applications. I can't remember on top of my head, but I think it's around 14. I gained acceptance into 4 universities. And currently I'm a second year PhD student at UC Davis. And yeah, and Mary, you can go ahead. I think you're muted. Okay. Yeah, I can hear you now. There you go. There you go.
I don't know what is happening today of all days, but it's always like when you're presenting that Wi-Fi starts cutting out. So anyways, hi everyone. My name is Mary Isaac. I'm a 5th year political science PhD student at UC Irvine, also in political science. So we have 2 political scientists in the house. I currently my research is going to be looking at the legacy of violence and marginalization on political behaviors. So what that means is, how does violence impact behaviors, political decision, voting preferences, things like that. And I'm specifically looking at how it impacts integration into new countries. So after people have moved, after a violent period, how does that experience impact their political experience within their host country? So yeah, I am looking at, our own group and stuff. So it is a great way to kind of understand what all that experience had done to our people. So if you want to ask me questions about that later, that's totally fine. I'd love to answer more questions about it. In UCI, I also work for the DTEI, which is the Division of Teaching Excellence. So this basically helps me, it's pedagogy training. So it's preparing me to become a better professor and academic. So teaching focused. And then I also mentor decade students. So these are 1st gen graduate students. So I'm in the process of mentoring them as well. And I expect to finish my PhD late in 2024. So I'll hit the job market by 2025. And yeah, that's me.
Perfect. And then your application cycle year was 2018. So a couple years before me. So it was a little bit different. There wasn't a pandemic. So that was a little bit less hectic. So that was, a good experience for you to contribute today in discussing about as well. And I know that you submitted 8 applications, you got acceptance into Irvine, and you're a 5th year. So this is really important. And let's go ahead and kind of get into the gist of today's talk. So here's a brief overview of what we're going to be discussing. So how to make your graduate school application stand out. And we're going to be discussing a couple key elements within the application that will be really important for your application cycle and making sure that you get all the information here so you can craft a really good and outstanding competitive application for yourself. What was our experience like when applying to graduate school? So we'll kind of give you advice in terms of what it was like when we applied, what was the decisions how we made those decisions to specific schools that we wanted to apply to, so on and so forth, and the lessons we learned along the application process that we want to share with you so that you are more equipped with knowing about the little tips and tricks with PhD/master's application processes. And lastly, we'll have a Q&A session. Like I said earlier, you can also ask questions throughout the entire webinar, and we'll go ahead and answer them. With that said,
I have a question for everyone. Which graduate degree are you interested in applying for? It's a PhD, master's, law even.
And you can all go ahead and type the question or your answers in the chat so that we can kind of see what's out there, and also what field of study are you interested in. So if you're interested in political science, history, natural sciences, anything like that, so we can kind of understand who our audience is, and so that we can kind of give some advice to everybody. So hold on one second. So Mary, I cannot see the answers, but maybe students haven't or people haven't done that yet. So we can definitely go on and come back to that as soon as they put some answers in.
I don't see them either. Not yet. I don't think anyone's typed them in yet.
Okay. So the first thing we'll talk about is letters of recommendation. So before you start your whole graduate application process, it's really vital that you have some sort of relationship with professors, and you build that relationship early on before you start applying. And the reason for that is that you want to make sure you have some idea where you can ask professors to obtain letters of recommendation for you, so they can write you letters of recommendation. And the best way to do that is you have to get good grades, really go talk to the professors and gauge their opinion about graduate school. Ask them questions related to what was their application process like? Would you recommend that for me? And you can also just do that by going into their office hours and just making yourself known and talking to them. I think that's really the best advice to give to obtain letters of recommendation. And how do you ask for these? Really, it's kind of like the question that everybody kind of is thinking about is, after you meet with professors, kind of they get to know you, you get to know them. Let them know that you're seriously considering going into graduate school in whatever respective field that you want to. And majority of the time, they will say yes to write you letters. It's part of their whole, I guess, not duty, but, requirement for professors. And if you maintain really good grades and you're a good student in the class, that would be a simple yes for them. So after you ask, what do you do? So this kind of, it was something that I was thinking about during my application process. So after I asked them, how do I keep them in the loop with my whole cycle? Like, what year am I applying and things of that nature? So what I did is I notified them when I was applying, and I sent them a spreadsheet that was really detailed in terms of the programs, the universities, the deadlines for the letters of recommendation they can submit, and links and other information that was really important for them to know about. And how I did that, here's a screenshot of my actual spreadsheet that I created a couple of years ago. So this is just a little brief overview. I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but for instance, University of Michigan, this is the deadline for submitting the PhD application, which is also the same deadline for the letters of recommendation, which were the professors that I wanted them to submit letters of recommendations on behalf. Some information related to program or how to do this letter recommendation, how to address a letter, and how to submit it. So it's very detailed, but what I did this really for my my letter recommenders, to make it very easy for them to submit letters on my behalf and to make it just easy. And so they have all that information in one spreadsheet. And Mary, I don't know if you did something like this, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't have an Excel spreadsheet, but I did send very detailed messages and links of what each school was asking for as well, because they're all so different. So, and professors, they get at least maybe 200 emails a day. And if you're not spelling it out for them and walking them through the process, you can't expect them to give you a letter of recommendation on time. So you need to help them make their job as easy as possible for you to get that letter. And this is a great way to do it with this Excel spreadsheet.
Mary, go ahead and take it away.
So the next very important thing is your statement of academic purpose. So this is probably very high on the list. You want to start early. 4 to 6 months in advance is a suggested timeline, but you can start, as soon as you know that you want to start like applying for graduate school, start jotting down ideas for things that are going to go on your statement of purpose, which one is relevant research experience. This is like probably the top thing that you want to be able to discuss is what you have done research-wise and what you're going to kind of write about and do research-wise in your program. So it's not only important to start writing the statement of purpose, but it's also important to start planning what you want to be in your statement of purpose. So if you're in your second year of undergrad right now or third year, I would start doing some research, getting some relevant research experience so that you can start preparing for something to apply with. So research experience, I mean, it could look at like anything. It could be your own writing that you did for a class. It could be something you did for an institution or for an internship. Or it could be work you did with a professor, sometimes just like RAing with a professor in your undergrad. That's enough research experience that gets you that sets apart your application from others. So you want to be able to talk about what you did with that professor research-wise, and then how that helped shape your graduate research. So did you do some R coding, or did you compile a list of interviews and summarize the interviews for the professor's book or something like that? That's what I did. So that kind of stuff, relevant research experience, very important. And then co-authored articles or just any kind of publication that you have. You want to be able to obviously showcase that, show that off, because these are important things. Again, when you're applying to grad school, you want to make it seem that you are a worthy investment, because graduate schools, they pay for you to come to their school. So they want to know that you kind of know how to do some research before going into grad school. They want to know that you know how the system works. You know what research looks like. You know how to structure a paper. So if you can show that with these co-authored articles or some relevant research experience, then you're good. You're good to go. So put that in your statement of purpose.
Yeah, so as Mary was saying, she highlighted the really key important things with putting stuff in your statements of purpose. But after you compile this necessary information, you want to structure your paper in a way where it's really interesting and you capture the audience. And your audience is really the admissions committee, and they're made up of professors within the department that you're applying for. And the best way to capture the audience is to start off by telling a really brief yet compelling story about yourself and what directly relates to your experiences, and discuss your research. And really the best way to do that is to tell them where you are academically. So are you an undergrad? Are you a master's student? Tell them what experiences you have that would be helpful for being a graduate student. Tell them what your graduate school interests are, and these interests related to your own research. So you could be, for instance, a psychology student and you're interested into, I don't know, understanding autism, for instance, and tell them what you want to do with these interests. So I want to study autism because of this reason, or because I'm interested in understanding the neurological behaviors of people's mind, or something along those lines. And tell them your goal and why you are applying to the specific program. I think that's really important to highlight, because you want to make sure you relate this goal into the graduate application process. So for instance, your goal is to become a professor, your goal is to become a researcher. State that really clearly in the intro. And the best way to kind of do that is to show you an example. And this example is of my personal example when I applied. And this is the intro. So I was a master's student when I applied in 2020. So I stated that right off the bat. I made sure that they knew where I was coming from, where I was academically. And I had research experiences, and specifically what research experiences I had in international relations. And I went on to say, what are the fields I'm interested in learning? So bilateral, multilateral agreements, civil conflicts, international cooperation, excuse me, so on and so forth. And these are kind of the same interests I still hold today. So that's pretty good. And then what I wanted to do with these research interests. So I want to examine defense cooperations, military interventions, and how these impact civil conflicts, so on and so forth. So state the interest, state what you want to do with the interest. It was really important. And lastly, I put in my goals. So what I want to do with this PhD, for instance, I want to grow intellectually, expand my co-authorships, achieve a university teaching career. And I believe that UC Davis, this was UC Davis's one. So I believe they would be the ones that would help me achieve those goals. Again, you don't have to make it really, really specific. You don't really have to say, like, I'm interested in international conflict. You can say you are interested in certain things. You don't have to go in intricate detail. If you have those details, sure, put it in. If not, that's okay too. And the next thing, Mary, if you want to go ahead and take it on from here.
Yeah, for sure. So the next, after that main introduction paragraph, where you do like really just set the stage for what you're going to be researching, this is when you get into the nitty gritty. You want to tell the admissions committee that you're going to be a good graduate student with 3 experiences that you've had prior to applying that are going to make you stand out, that are going to make them see that you are able to juggle multiple responsibilities, able to get things done in a timely manner and finish the program on time, and that you are, committed to your research. So these experiences can be anything like an internship that kind of like bolstered your interest in academia or interest in international, cooperation or conflict resolution. So if you entered with the UN or anything like that, good, put that stuff on there. If you had an experience such as like RAing with the professor, so you talk about that experience and how that, did that open, your eyes to a new field of research that you want to contribute to, or how many hours did you work on that research, on that research team, and how were you able to manage doing that plus your regular coursework? Because all of these things are just demonstrating, again, your preparation for graduate school, and how, I guess, invested you are into graduate school and how much you're going to put in. So that's very important. Have some experiences. I hope you have some experiences. If not, we can like work with what you have and then show how that demonstrates your ability or your desire to go to grad school. There's always something to work with. And then number two, another important thing is tell the admissions committee who you'd like to work with in the department. So different from applying for undergrad, where you really didn't need to know any of the professors, different from applying to maybe a master's program or a law program, where you do not need any prior, knowledge of who the professors were or what they taught or what their research focus was. Graduate schools are very centered on the professor who you work with. So your advisor is going to be pretty much in your life for the next 4 or 5 years. So you want to be picking a graduate school program based on that relationship. So do your research interests match with a professor? And if they do, put that in your statement of purpose, because they want to see that you have a good match with one of their faculty members. So you can do this very easily. You just go on the department's website, you look at all the professors, and sometimes you could just type in a keyword and be like, Middle East politics or legacy of violence or anything like that. And you see if there's someone who matches with you. Do a little bit of more research on that professor that does match with you. Start looking into their research methods, anything that they've published. And if you think that that's a good fit, put that in your statement of purpose. I want to work with Professor Kopstein, blah, 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 because Professor blah, 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 also works with the legacy of violence. And I believe that they will help me, write my dissertation, or however it is, you want to put that in there because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for a good research match. So that's very important. Yeah.
And to kind of give a glimpse of what all the information Mary has explained, here's a brief paragraph that's from my statement of academic purpose, where I discussed my research experience. I had a research experience with Dr. Acevedo when I was a master's student, and I co-authored an article. At that point, it was a revise to resubmit, and currently now it's published. So at that point, I just mentioned that because it's really important for them to know. And I specifically said what I did. So in this article, I co-designed and administrated a retrospective survey using Qualtrics, and I specifically labeled and mentioned certain softwares because it's very important for them to know what skills I gained from this experience. And then I took the data and created a database in SPSS statistics to analyze if active learning impacted students' interpersonal skill set development, which was the main focus of that article. And the results showed that in comparison to traditional students, first-generation students' interpersonal skill sets were positively impacted. While this article focused on survey experimentation and multiple method analysis, I gained analytical skills using SPS statistics and Qualtrics that prepares me to conduct future research as a doctoral student. So I kind of summed up what I did, who I did it with, the relevance of the article. So I kind of stated the thesis, I stated what I took from it and why it's preparing me for my graduate studies. And note that how I did it, it was a very short paragraph. You really only have maybe 2 pages, sometimes up to a page to 2.5. So you don't really have a lot of space you're working with to write your statement of academic purpose. So you want to really start early. And I, on the bottom of this screen, it says timeline 4 to 6 months in advance. So you want to start this really, really early. Maybe 6 months is too advanced for you. Maybe 4 months is perfect. Whatever is more meaningful to you, go with it. But I started roughly 5 months in advance because it takes me a while to write something about myself. It's not really natural. Writing about yourself is really harder than what it sounds like. Mary, I don't know if it was hard for you too, but putting everything down and writing it out, it will help you tailor your work. And having 5 months in advance, whatever, how many months in advance you need, it will force you to kind of cut back on certain things and try to make your statement of purpose clear and concise, which is really something that you need to know going forward. Keep your paragraph short, yet get to the point, and make sure you spell out everything, but not everything, just the key details for them to know. And so this is the the conclusion. And in my conclusion, what Mary mentioned previously was mention the specific professors that you want to work with in the program. For example, this is an application for UC Davis. I mentioned, I think, two professors, McKibb and Kinney. And these are the professors that I researched pretty thoroughly. I went to their website. I looked at their CV. I looked to see, hey, are these going to be the ones that fit my research interests? And they do. And so I brought them up, and I basically just said I would like to work under the supervision of Brandon Kinney to research how defense cooperation and international conflicts impact peace resolutions. So I tied in my research interests and their research interests together in one sentence. And I did the same with McKibbin. It's actually McKibbin, not McKibb. So I did a typo on there. Please be careful when you write professor's name. To research the complexities of peace processes and how it impacts civil conflicts. So I kind of summarized basically why I want to work with them. They have the same similar interests as me. And above all, working with these two professors would allow me to exercise my need to embrace survey experiments, active collaboration, and strive for analytical rigor within my research interests. So that sentence kind of lets whoever's reading this, the professors who are reading this, why I want to work with them and why it's necessary for me to mention that. They happen to work with survey experiments. They happen to actively collaborate with graduate students. Again, I know this because I researched about that and I highlighted it into my application. And lastly, for this academic statement of academic purpose, I summarized my whole reason for applying in one sentence. So as a UC Davis alumnus, and I am a UC Davis alumnus, I'm excited to rejoin a community rich in engagement, networking, and culture. Simple. If you're not an alumnus to wherever you're applying to, that's fine. Just say, I want to apply to UC Davis because of A, B, and C, or because of A and B. Just make it clear and show that you're excited. Diversity statement. So Mary, I'll probably take this and then we can move on to the next couple of slides. So diversity statement is something really new. Mary, I don't know if you did this during 2018 when you applied, but
We did not.
No, yeah. See, this is really, this has become new. I think it started probably in 2019 or 2020, where they really require you to address past or potential contributions to diversity through teaching, research, or services. And it's also a reflection of the values that you hold in relationships to principles of diversity. So institutions of higher learning have requested such statements for applications to PhD programs, postdoctoral positions, and faculty appointments. And this source was from the University of Chicago. So this level of importance is medium, which means that it's important. Obviously, you want to do a good job and do a good diversity statement, but I wanted to bring, Mary and I both wanted to bring this to your attention because this is something that is also important to highlight in a successful graduate application. And Mary, I don't know if you want to take it from here.
Sure. So things you need to consider before your diversity statement, which again, it's not level of importance, we put medium, but because most universities are very much becoming, what's the word for it? Forward thinking, or they're trying to be more diverse and inclusive. I would really start thinking about, a lot of these things. Look into your university's diversity statements. Look what they're saying about it. Look what they focus on or highlight about their own programs. And first of all, see if that's a match with how you align yourself. And then you need to understand what diversity and inclusion mean to you. So it's going to look different from what you conceptualize diversity and inclusion versus what your university does. Think about your experiences that have shaped your understanding and values, and how you could contribute to current initiatives or perhaps serve to enhance their resources. So again, your university will have a very specific diversity statement, and try to tailor each statement of purpose or each diversity statement to their university if you believe like that is a good match. But in general, you want to be able to define what diversity and inclusion mean to you. That's the most important thing. So do you want me to go into the next couple slides as well? Or
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, go ahead.
totally, that's fine. So how to structure your diversity statement to stand out. So what is your own experience and philosophy about diversity in education? So you should be able to tell us clearly by telling a compelling story about your experience with diversity and the ways in which, you know, you might come across this in graduate school, or how it'll impact your graduate school experience. So for example, as an Assyrian, and as someone first gen in grad school, we don't know a lot about what to expect in graduate school that, another colleague of mine who's had 2 professors as parents or something like that. So including that in your inclusion and diversity statement about how you are first gen, but you want to go to a school that does focus on and have first gen mentoring programs like the one that I'm a mentor for now. It's called Decade. Those are very important things for me to look out for and for me to want to contribute to, because I know how important it is to give back. So that's just one thing. Like, think about your own experience and your own philosophy about diversity and how you think this graduate school experience is going to help that, or you're going to be able to contribute to that. And then number 2, how does your identity impact your education experience? How is this tying into why you're applying for graduate school? So this is another big thing for, I think, Assyrians. They have, I don't know, I feel like there is this connection between most Assyrians who do have this deep desire, because of our identity, to further the research on Assyrian people. And that's exactly kind of why I wanted to get involved in graduate research, was because my experience as an Assyrian in poli-sci, and then not really seeing any work or publications about Assyrians and our current situation, that kind of made me want to get into graduate school and graduate research. So this is an example of how my identity exactly impacted my educational experience and then my research experience. So you might want to discuss why, your own personal, background, whatever that is, whatever identities you have, how that impacts your educational experience, and why that might be why you want to apply for graduate school. And then there is a final point on the next slide. Do you want me to take this, or you want to go for it?
No, go ahead. You're doing good.
Okay. And then finally, how you structure your diversity statement to stand out. So does your research experience directly address issues with diversity? So this is something they're going to be looking for, is if your research is now touching on topics of diversity and inclusion. And honestly, that sounds broad. It is broad. It is so broad because it's just so much research, and it can always encompass diversity. So you might not think like your research focus or your interest might even does it even relate to diversity and inclusion? Maybe not by what you might think those words mean, but I will promise you, if you are looking at any kind of just any kind of under-researched area, it is related to an issue of diversity and inclusion. And the more you are contributing to a field and to, a topic that is misunderstood or under-researched, you are somehow helping with this issue of diversity, or this lack of diversity that is in academia. And yeah, being an Assyrian with our identities, that is already addressing one issue of diversity for them. So it's true. They don't have a lot of people with our perspective, our background. We have a lot to bring to the table, and that's what they want. So you want to be able to talk about what your identity brings to this issue of a lack of diversity in academia. Okay, does that make sense?
It definitely does. Yeah, I know in my diversity statement, I did mention that I was Assyrian, and you probably did too, because like you already mentioned, it's very important where there is a lack of diversity in academia. That's slowly changing, but it won't change unless more diverse individuals like ourselves and potential people who are watching this, enter into the field. So the next thing that's really important is your curriculum vitae, your CV. It's a fancy way of just saying your resume, your academic resume. And this really is just a statement about yourself, and it's in a very singular way. It's a very simple way. I'm sure many of you have done resumes, so this is nothing new, but a CV is a little bit different, where it only states your academic experiences. So you want to start off by really articulating what you have done. So if you're an undergraduate student with any research experiences, you put that in there. If you don't have any, that's okay, because programs accept students without research experiences too. I know in my cohort, I think about 1/3 have published something prior to entering. So that means that 2/3 haven't. So don't feel discouraged that you haven't had any research experiences yet. And what you really need, your basic formatting of your CV, and this is 2 pages. So I'll kind of elaborate a little bit more. So you need a heading. I know that prior resumes and prior CVs have included mailing addresses. It's not the norm to do that now because of privacy issues. So I wanted to state that so it's very clear. Your education. So you want to list your academic degrees and progresses with the most recent degree that's earned first. Relative experience, list positions, like I was mentioning earlier. So if you have any research experiences, any TA-ships, if you are a master's student, you can mention that. And I should also say, I'll show examples of all of this. I'll show an example of my CV so that it's a little bit more clear, but this is just in abstract terms. I'm kind of relaying this over. And publications. So you want to give any bibliography citations for your articles, any co-authored stuff, if anything. If not, that's okay. And your current research. So if you are part of a research team or part of a lab, you can definitely add that. That's really relevant. Presentations. So this kind of entails to any research articles or articles that you're working on that are not published, and you're going ahead and discussing them in symposiums or at your school's symposium, or if they're having a specific talk about, I don't know why I'm stuck on psychology, but let's say a psychology talk and you're doing research. So include that. It's really important and necessary. Honors and awards. A lot of students applying for PhD programs are part of honor societies and have accolades. And so you definitely want to highlight that and don't downplay it. Qualifications and skills. So this is where you list the softwares that you know. So R, which is a statistical software, SPSS, similar, Python as well. Or if you know any other ones, C++, I don't know. I'm not a computer science person, but list the ones that you know. And professional associations. So you can be members of academic societies. For instance, the American Political Science Association. You can be part of that. You can be a member. You want to list that. Shows that you're involved in your community. If you don't have any memberships, it's really simple. You can become a member. There's student memberships. I think they don't cost more than $50 or $75 a year. And there's some pretty good benefits to it. I'm not going to address it in this webinar because there's just a lot to go all to kind of discuss. But the basic gist is that if you become a member of a specific organization, you can apply for their grants if you become a graduate student and things of that nature. So this is an example of a CV. So this is my CV. And this is exactly what I submitted to all of the schools. So I listed my research interests on top. And I decided to do that because I read somewhere that it's important to do that. It just reiterates what I already have mentioned in my statement of academic purpose. It makes it even more clear for the committees, the people in the committees to kind of stick in their brain, like, oh, this person, Alexandra, she definitely is interested in international conflict. And I remember that. So it sticks in their brain. It's a way to kind of have it as glue. Then I listed my education in order. I happen to have my master's thesis, I listed that. If you have an honors thesis for an undergraduate student, list that as well. Then I listed my graduate student academic experiences as a master's student. So I had 2 teaching experiences. I listed who they were with, what was the class, what I did, and the basic gist of it is I graded papers and I maybe taught a class, a lecture class, and I kind of reviewed materials with students. Similar, you can also list your research. It's kind of like apprenticeship if you have with a professor. If you're an RA, you can list that as well in here, something really important. And I think this is second to last. So publications. I happen to have a co-authored book chapter and a peer-reviewed article that was revised to resubmit status, so I included that. And listed the presentations that I was accepted to present my master's thesis at. So I listed those, and it was very terrifying, but I did it. And as a little master's student, I did it, but yeah, not very good, but it's okay. Include it. Lastly, memberships, grants that I received, and skills and accolades. Very straightforward. If you have any memberships, list them. If you have any grants, list them. Skills and accolades, I want, hopefully everybody has some skill and they need to list that, and some sort of accolade. If not, that's okay. And languages, I just added that because why not? It's kind of interesting. Always representing Assyrian in my applications.
Always including language.
Yeah, you have to, and then you have to list Aramaic in case people don't know. So anyways, so this is I think the final section. So Mary, please go ahead and take this away and I'll go on to the next slide.
Okay. So Alexandra and I kind of came up with like a shared list of things we thought was very important to keep in mind when you're applying for graduate schools or selecting graduate schools. So the first thing is that the program has to feel right. Like just like anything, it has to just feel right. You need to like where you're going to be living. You have to feel a sense of pride for the school and for the, program you're going to be affiliated with for the next couple of years, because it's a long couple of years. It's actually 5 or 6 years sometimes. Right. So you really have to like it. That's the first thing, because it's going to be your life for the next 5 years. And I can't downplay that enough. It's yeah. And then funding. It's very important that you guarantee and secure funding from a program. So if a program does not offer funding, which is awful, that's very bad. And it is, again, you're foregoing a salary job for the next 5 or 6 years. So you want to make sure you have proper ample funding for the time that you're going to be investing in education. And most PhD programs guarantee funding for 5 years. And sometimes they do more. If you can secure more funding, if you can secure summer funding, if you can get an RA-ship so you don't have to TA. But however it is, you want to make sure that they offer some kind of funding package that is really good. That's very important. Third, you have to be excited about the potential professors you're going to work with. If you just like the name of the school, like Harvard or whatever, and it sounds appealing, for sure, I get it. But if they have absolutely no research match to you, so they don't have a single professor in there who studies the topic or even the field that you want to do, and I can guarantee you most programs do not have that research fit. If that is not present, it's going to make your graduate experience very difficult. It's and I would say that's on the higher end of the list of priorities, is to have a research match, because your advisor, basically the person who guides you throughout your graduate program, can make or break your entire experience, and can really lead to whether you get a good dissertation committee that vouches for you, that helps you find the jobs afterwards, that helps you with the publications, or someone who's not very interested in you because they don't have the same research interests. So you want to be able to make sure that that matches there. Next, need to feel like the overall atmosphere of the department is good. So when you get accepted to a graduate program, you get to go to the school for a visiting day. That's your opportunity to start talking to these graduate students and ask them, get a sense of the department, get a sense of the camaraderie or the environment. Is it very competitive? Is it very friendly? Are they supportive? My program, I can tell you, is a very, very friendly. Everyone seems to help each other. There doesn't seem to be an ounce of competitive spirit, except for maybe among some of the older generation who believes in the competitive nature of graduate school, but that is not present at all in my program anymore. And yeah, but graduate students are very honest. I also seen graduate students tell us, incoming students, do not come here. Do not come here because they do not support students in this program. So I would definitely talk to those graduate students, see if they like it, because it'll tell you a lot about your next 5 years or 6 years. And then research job prospects of the program. So if this program seems to be, putting students on the path towards a job in academia, or jobs in a university that you like, or universities that you like, and it sounds good to you, that's a good thing. Look up those job prospects of all those graduate students who are graduating, because they do list that on their website. Because this is how graduate programs sell themselves, is based on where their graduate students get jobs at. So they'll have all that information on the website. You can check it out. And if you see like, oh, that looks pretty good, or, oh, they don't get jobs anywhere, or doesn't seem like they're getting hired anywhere at all, that says a lot about the graduate program. Either the faculty is not helpful, or the program is not supportive, and it's not really like leading towards completion. So all very important things to look at. Yeah.
So we'll kind of take it from there in terms of figuring out where we applied and why we did that. So for myself, I applied to now 15 schools. So went from 14 to 15. So it was 15. And they were top 25 rank in political science, and specifically in the subfields of international relations, which is what I wanted to go into. So the big gist of how did I decide where I wanted to apply to? So I went to a lot of informational sessions, and I kind of listened to the various programs, various people in the departments, the professors, to kind of get a gist of what the professors were like. And I should say I did this to the schools that I got accepted into. So I got into 4 schools, and I went to these informational sessions, and I kind of wanted to figure out, okay, well, the school sounded nice on paper, but how is it actually in person or virtually, because it was during the pandemic? And I asked questions. I asked related to funding, will there be any summer funding? Is it just yearly funding? Is it 5 years? Is there any funding? How is it like? Spoke with certain professors who I deemed that I wanted to work with in my application. And I kind of got a gist of who they were, asked them specific questions. Hey, who do you work with right now? Are you working with professors? Are you working with students? Kind of wanted to gauge the kind of reception of like, who are they working with, and are they still interested in working with graduate students? And really the factor where I wanted it to go, I got accepted into Davis, and I ended up in Davis because it's really a better fit for me. Like Mary was saying in the earlier slide, I kind of had a list of things that I wanted each school to have before I said yes to. So funding was really key. I needed to make sure I had some sort of secured funding for at least 5 years, which is the norm now. I know, Mary, the norm for you is, I think, 6 years.
Yeah.
And I wanted to like the opportunities that they offered. I wanted to see if they worked with students, and they did at UC Davis, and it was a very friendly environment. So the atmosphere was it was less competitive than other schools. And the other schools were a little bit higher ranked, but more competitive, and I didn't like that. And familiarity with the school. So I was really familiar with UC Davis. I went there as an undergrad. So I knew specifically, okay, who, the layout of the school, I liked it. It's very quaint and, it attracted me and I liked it. So, and close proximity to my parents. And so I wanted to kind of stay close enough so I can take an airplane ride. And I'm originally from Los Angeles, so it's an hour and 10 minutes and some change. So those are all the factors that I considered. And I decided UC Davis was the right fit for me. And I'm actually really happy that I ended up here. It's my second year, so I survived and and I like it. Yeah. So I think the next slide is really Mary's decision.
My experience, yes. So this is quite different from Alexandra's. So when I was applying to graduate school, honestly, I didn't know half the things that we are telling you now. So things like that research fit, that being as important as we're emphasizing it. I didn't really think that was true or serious. So I'll tell you about my experience. I applied to 8 schools that were also top 25 rank in political science. You can look up the rankings, but again, I'm realizing now this stuff isn't as important as research fit. And at the time, I really just wanted to go to another UC. I was under the impression that like, oh, if I'm just, in the UC system, like, well, I'll just get hired again. I went to UCLA for my undergrad. I wanted to go to UCLA for my grad. I was like, okay, whatever. I just want to go to UC. Not really knowing or paying attention to things like research fit, who the professors were, what kind of research they did, and whether they were working with graduate students or not. This is all important stuff to me now on the other side of the graduate program. But back then, I kind of applied to graduate schools like an undergrad would apply to undergrad schools where you just send your application everywhere. So I applied to 8 schools and I only got into 1. And that's because this is important because the research fit. I didn't match with anyone. Again, when I was looking at schools, I was looking at the professors and I did the research, just like Alexandra mentioned, where you look them up and you kind of like see, is there anything like similar? Do they do, are they on topic with you? And I didn't have a fit with any of the professors at the UCs that I applied to. So I was like, okay, that's okay, well, what's the worst that can happen? Well, you get rejected. So I definitely did want to emphasize this now, learning about my program. But when I wanted to apply, I also made sure everything had funding guaranteed. There was a few programs, I think Chicago or something was only guaranteeing funding for like 4 years or 3 years, or not even. And I was like, what? How can you do that? That was top of my list to have funding guaranteed. And then I also looked at some of the research focus. I know that some of these programs had Middle East politics, things like that. But again, I didn't look as closely to the faculty specific stuff. I wanted to also make sure that some of these programs had pedagogy training programs. So in addition to getting a PhD, it's important for me to be a pedagogically centered, focused, well-trained professor. I don't want to just be any professor. My main priority in getting this PhD was to become a professor and teach in a teaching-oriented school, not do research. That's not my main goal with this PhD. My main goal is to teach. So I wanted to be sure that the graduate program also had pedagogy embedded in it, which UCI, which is my perfect fit, it does have a huge teaching center just focused on pedagogy and training all of their graduate students on how to become better professors. So, and then obviously close to home, I applied to all the UCs within the vicinity, but I got into UC Irvine, which was perfect and a godsend, 40 minutes away from me driving. And program completion rate. That was another thing that I kept looking at was if people were actually finishing, and you can see their stats on some ranking websites, or you could just look at each program's website. And you can see that students are still there for 7, 8, 9 years. And if that's there's something off, you know, like you have to
Yeah.
understand. Not every student is different. That's definitely true. I'm a little behind. That's not a problem. Is it a problem of the program itself? And that was something that I needed to make sure that was there, that the program was supporting its students. So that's how I decided where to apply. And then obviously my decision was made for me with the one acceptance, perfect acceptance. So I'm glad. I'm very, very happy where I'm at. So yeah, that's that.
It actually worked out though. You're
Did-
from the OC area, so it's like perfect.
Yeah.
It
Things
was meant,
always
right? It was meant, and it was meant for me to go back to Davis. Life is a full circle. I don't know. It's kind of crazy. So I think we're gonna probably finish up quite soon, or it's a little bit over an hour, but that's okay. We kind of started a little bit late, but so lessons we learned along the application process is something we're going to highlight very briefly, yet provide pretty good info. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them, or if you don't, that's okay too. You can always contact us after. So you want to know your research interests before you apply. I think that's so crucial. You want to know, really, if you don't know your research interests, why are you applying? And that's something that will come across really, really quickly in your statement of purpose if you don't have that already set. Making sure you have a tight research fit with the university. So something that Mary was saying earlier is making sure you have these professors in the program that you share similar interests with and who you want to work with, what draws you to this program. It's very important because if you are not drawn to a specific professor or professors in a program with the same interests as you, again, you won't get accepted. It's the chances of you getting accepted, it's very, very slim to none. And the reason for that is because these professors have this expertise in a specific field and they want to work with students to mentor them. It's all about mentorship. It's all about making you into a potential professor, potential academic, potential researcher, so on and so forth, whatever field you want to end up with. And you really want to get professors who wrote your letter of recommendation to read your application. That's a really good advice that both Mary and I strongly agreed on because, the more your statement is being exposed to the professors who wrote these letters of recommendation on your behalf, the more they can highlight, hey, you're going overboard with this specific research experience. Do it 1 or 2 sentences and give a reason why. Give you a reason why you want to apply, give a reason for the skills you've acquired that will contribute to their PhD program or your master's program. You want to negotiate and advocate for funding. If you're offered multiple acceptances, if you're lucky enough to offer multiple acceptances, you can definitely advocate for yourself and try to negotiate a better funding. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I've heard in my own cohort that it didn't really work. But you never know because people are different, programs are different, and you should always just try. It's always free to try. You can always get a no, and that's okay, but at least you tried, so you know. And ask about summer funding. So this is something where both Mary and I, summer funding is really tough for PhD students. If you're going into a master's program, summer funding is not part of the package. But if you are applying for PhD programs, you want to know in advance, are they offering this specific funding? If they're not, then you have to find your own means to pay for education for 3 months or 2 months, however long your summer is. And that's probably one of the largest things where you should consider. So if you get accepted, you should always ask, is there summer funding? If not, what are the ways I can obtain that? Sometimes they have graduate summer researcher experiences. You can do student collaborations. You can become a summer TA. This again is relevant because you want to know, you want to plan your life, and it's a big thing. You're not taking a salary, and so as an academic, as a graduate student, you have to make sure you know where your funding is coming from, and so you want to plan ahead. So this is the questions and answers session. I don't see any specifically, but we also are Facebook Live, and I don't have access to check that out right now. So Mary, I don't know if you can see if there's any Facebook
Let me check.
questions or comments. I can't exit this. So
Okay.
But if there is not, that's okay. We can always address them later. So if you send us an email or if you contact me specifically later on, if you come up with something, we can definitely go ahead and address it. This was a lot of information thrown your way. And we tried to do our best to organize it where it's not too overwhelming, but it's just informative, and it'll help you kind of get a sense of, if you are considering applying for a master's or PhD, this is what it takes. Certain things that we didn't address was the GRE or the GMAT, because a lot of programs have made it optional. So if this optional, that means you do not have to submit it, and that's fine. And yeah, so Mary, I don't know if there is anything.
No question.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think we've educated everybody enough where they're like, okay, this is good. This is good information. So we'll go ahead and do a closing. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today on behalf of Mary and myself. Mary, I don't know if you have any last words to say before I close it up.
Any last words? No, just that we're definitely here as a resource if you do decide to apply. I'm definitely happy to help look over anything. And even if you need some advice for, like, you're not there yet when it comes to applying, but I'd say that's the best time to start getting advice, is like when you're barely even thinking about graduate school, because it's a good time to start planning like what you can put on your resume or what you put on your application. So definitely always seek advice and help and editing from anyone you can, because that's just going to help your process a lot better, or make it a lot easier.
Yeah, and to highlight what Mary just said, yes, we're both here as a resource. So you'll get a